We're going to dig a little deeper into the election. We're going to bring in Joel Payne and Leslie Sanchez for some analysis. Joel Payne, you are a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist, and Leslie Sanchez, you are a CBS News political analyst. Thank you so much for joining us extra early, so we appreciate it.
Yes.
So you heard, Nancy, you heard us talk about the Supreme Court ruling about the mail-in ballots affecting North Carolina and Pennsylvania, giving those two states additional time or additional ballots that they'll be able to count depending on when they received it. Pennsylvania is going to have 3 extra days after Election Day, and North Carolina is going to have 9 extra days. So as long as they receive those ballots within that period of time, those ballots have to be counted. This is sort of being couched as rather a win for the Democrats. So Joel, I want to ask you, why is it considered a win?
I'm not quite sure why it's being considered a win. It kind of should be considered common sense. Democrats have been pretty firm in their belief that we should be making sure that there's access to voting, particularly emergency access, given that we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I think this is one of the frustrations with President Trump and how he's politicized the court and how kind of the battle lines have been drawn here. There was another consequential ruling a few days ago where Justice Kavanaugh kind of like laid out battle lines that would suggest that there's a thread of argument that Republicans could use after the election if they wanted to discount ballots. I don't think that's a good frame, not just for Democrats. I just think that's a bad frame for resolving this election in a meaningful way that's going to unite the country after the fact. Because at the end of the day, you're going to have a president that folks feel is legitimate. And if the courts are politicized, that's going to be hard to achieve.
A similar question for you, Leslie, because I sort of also wondered why this would be considered a win for Democrats when we think about the support that President Trump receives from seniors, and presumably many seniors will be mailing in their ballots because, you know, they're more vulnerable to the virus. What do these rulings mean for Republicans in North Carolina and in Pennsylvania?
Those are 2 of the most critical battleground states, right, where the lines are the razor-thin margins of what could determine the successor in that state is really going to determine who could win potentially the presidency. That's why there's going to be tremendous scrutiny, Anne-Marie, on every ballot. Is it legitimate? And so that there's not any type of, errors involved. That's really kind of the specter of what the president has challenged some of these, and the Republicans have as well, just ensuring that everybody that can vote has the opportunity to, but that there's not some sort of, ballot that should not be counted. Because of that, there's an anticipation that all the lawyers are ready on speed dial to parachute into these states and start looking at legal battles. I think they've been alluded to on conference calls that the Democrats have been having, and you certainly heard the president talking about this could take a couple of months. Hopefully that's not the case, but there is this common thread that somehow we're going to all end up in court to determine the legitimacy of some of these ballots, and I think this is the first salvo.
Well, we've been saying it's not election day. It's going to be election week, perhaps weeks. Joel, both of the candidates are scheduled to campaign in Florida today. Our CBS News battleground tracker indicates that Joe Biden has a slight lead in that state, but it's still within the margin of error. So what does the former vice president really need to focus on in order to win Florida?
Well, Florida's been such a tricky state for Democrats in the last few cycles. And, I think Biden has some natural advantages there, particularly in this moment where President Trump has really tanked with seniors. Obviously, Florida is a senior-laden state. Also, you have shifting dynamics in populations and groups of voters in kind of that central I-4 corridor in Florida around Orlando and Tampa. And then obviously there's a Republican stronghold in the Cuban community in the South. So I think Biden has to be able to offset some of those natural Republican advantages, but really pull out places where Democrats could potentially make some gains. Remember, Hillary Clinton only lost Florida by 1 percentage point last time. I think Joe Biden is a stronger candidate. By the way, he feels like if you're thinking strategically about the map, on election day, if he's able to win in Florida and knock out Trump in Florida, that's significant for the other states that are in play in the battleground. Florida is so key because it kind of sets up a post-election contested election scenario in other states if Biden could put Florida in his column.
Leslie, before we let you go, I got to ask you about Hispanic voters. The president campaigned in Arizona yesterday, made an appeal to Hispanic voters. We've heard him brag a lot about the support that he enjoys within the Hispanic community. I want to play some of the sound.
We're going to win a record share of the Hispanic vote this election day. We are going to win a number that's never been won by a Republican, and maybe we're going to beat the Democrats. That will be incredible.
Okay, we know that the president likes to talk like that, but you know, the Hispanic vote, as we have discussed before, is a very diverse vote. You know, the interest of Hispanic voters in Texas, very different than in Florida. Why does the president think that he is enjoying more support than any other Republican within this very important block of voters?
That's a really hard one. On fact-checking that one, Emery, you know, that's a big no in terms of his Hispanic support, you know, through the charts. He'd be in the territory of George W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, if he were in that. And those are numbers that are around the mid-40s in terms of national support if you put Hispanic vote together. So, look, Republicans don't win Hispanic support in terms of, you know, 60%, 51%. But to be competitive, if we're in the high 30s, low 40s, we are changing the dynamic of the state, especially in the Southwest, certainly in Florida, and increasingly in the Midwest. So if Republicans earn about 31.5% of Hispanic vote for the last 11 presidential cycles, the president is somewhere in that range. He's about on par. The reason that's good, it makes him competitive in those states. If he's above that in Arizona or above that in Florida, it's going to really show some marks or put points on the board. But more importantly, he's not down in the Bob Dole 96 territory of 26, 27%. The president's above that. He enjoys the support of people like the border security initiatives and just kind of his stronger stances on growth of the economy. So you're right, very diverse, not going to be the high point, but it makes the president competitive.
All right, Joel and Leslie, I know we'll be talking to you guys more over the next week or so. Thank you so much.